I mean, it was, I mean, I'm talking, it wasn't 10 feet off the
The flag came up.
You're good to go, Wes.
Ready to go?
Make sure all your mics are on, please.
Okay. I think we're ready to start this meeting. This will be the June 14th Madison County Planning Commission meeting, 2022. We're going to start with a prayer.
Let's all pray. Dear Lord, we just thank you for our many, many blessings that we have. Beautiful summer day and these rains that refreshes the earth. Lord, we just thank you for all this. We thank you for our freedoms that we have. We thank you for all the people that gave their lives so that we can have the freedoms that we experience each and every day. Lord, as we continue, we just ask to lift up the military and all the policemen and firemen as they protect us. Lord, we just ask you that you will protect them as they serve us. Lord, as we continue today, we just ask that you will help us make good decisions for the county. This we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. All right, if everybody stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. We have a roll call, Stacy.
Yes, sir.
I see an L up there.
Okay, perfect. That's all I want to know. I couldn't see. I want to make sure. All right. Mark Geary. Denise Spooner.
Here.
Jerry Alexander.
Here.
Lindsey Brown. Lindsey, are you here? Here. Okay. Tom Shepard.
Here.
John Richwine.
Here.
John Zimmerman.
Here.
Corey Bowlander.
Here.
And Wes Likens.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I wasn't here, but we need to approve the May 10th minutes. Are there any addition or correction to those minutes?
I move we accept the motions as read, or the minutes as read.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion passes. Thank you. All right. Rachel?
All right, first item of business, or I guess this is old business, is petition number 2022-Z-004. This was tabled from our May meeting. The address is 2901 North Madison Avenue in Anderson. This is in Lafayette Township. The petitioner is Kathleen Gray. She has a conservation residential zoned parcel that she is requesting to be rezoned to general commercial. Would you guys like me to go through what we went through at the May meeting on my staff report, or do we want to just go to Ms. Gray to see what additional information she has from the last meeting?
I've read through the staff reports. I don't know if it's necessary to go through that, at least for me, but what were the concerns at the last meeting that we were waiting on Mrs. Gray to come back?
We had asked Mrs. Gray to, she kind of had some decisions to make on whether, I think where we landed was, we asked her to move the rear property line, the westernmost property line, more to the west so that her structures could come into compliance with the general commercial zoning district. So that was one thing to look at. We also had asked her to talk with the neighbors and come up with a game plan for her buffer yard area, because I think the commission didn't think it was necessary that she had a full buffer yard as required by the ordinance. So you guys were giving her some time to kind of come up with her game plan on where she thought it was appropriate for her buffer yard so that we could talk about it today. Did that seem Like I covered it? All right.
Yeah, well, that's what we kind of talked about that at the BZA, didn't we?
This was all at Plan Commission.
Was this all planning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we had also talked about, so she had 3 parcels total that were part of the original rezone request, and it
right.
sounded like last month that the 2 westernmost parcels we would leave zoned as conservation residential, but that front parcel that was along Madison Avenue would be rezoned to general commercial. So, and I think you wanted to think about that too, so. All right, well, I'll turn it over to Kathleen Gray then.
Make sure you sign in and state your name, please. Okay, thank you.
I need a pen. Thanks. My name is Kathleen Gray. I have the signatures from the 3 neighbors that I was instructed to get their take on if they want a barrier between the park and their home.
And that's closest to the road, from the road out?
Uh-huh, yes, and all 3 say no on the barrier.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
And we went over and measured 35 feet. Seems it butts up to where the tree line starts. So that looks like a good place to rezone the front back 35 feet to stay then in compliance with having the front be commercial. So I spoke with Steve Surveys, he has the survey of the front part and the back part. He said he could do the paperwork on that for us, move it back 35 feet. I spoke with Tom Beeman. He said that he would type up the new deed and get that done. I spoke with, I called Homeland Security on the deck part, and they referred me to a different number. And I spoke with her on Thursday to inspect the deck that the people get married on. And she was supposed to send back a link so I could sign up for a entertainment permit. And she has not. As of this morning, she has not. So that is in the works as well. So I think that's all I was supposed to do on my end. I don't know who needs these guys. The signatures of the neighbors. I do, please.
So on the permit, entertainment permit for the deck, who will inspect that?
They said that once she sends me the link, then they send someone out from the state.
The state will inspect it.
And the state will inspect it.
Turn it on.
I went to college. Is it still working?
I don't think so.
I don't think it is working.
Anyway, here.
We had trouble with that last time. It doesn't matter to it.
When you get it inspected, and I'm sure they'll give you some kind of paperwork, could you send it to our office too, just so we can put it with your file?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
It's working out.
Here's your pen.
Oh, thank you.
So ultimately,
Yeah.
we're just trying to get the permit to
Right.
build the bride and groom's house. And I don't know if all of that is contingent to getting the survey and the deeds done, and if I need to turn that back in, at that point, can I get the permit? I don't know whatever I need to do.
Okay, so I gotta. So this is gonna be my Ball State brain on the fly. So if you guys do approve a rezone today, this would have to go to the commissioners.
Right.
And the commissioners would then have to approve it as well. So if it goes to commissioners, Stacy, you might need to help us with this one. With advertising, when is the next commissioners meeting that she could go to?
The commissioners only need a 48-hour notice
Okay.
for their portion of it, so
So it's
next Tuesday.
So there's plenty of time.
Now,
next
will
Tuesday.
John, will you vote on that with the conditions that everything we've talked about will be approved?
Yeah, and we could set our own conditions as well, but typically, we're just going to approve the conditions that you guys set forth.
Okay. I didn't know if you did do that before it was done, or
The
you
commissioner
had to wait
set
till it
an
was
additional
done.
condition, it bounces back to you guys.
I got you. Okay.
So best case scenario, you guys would have great conditions, you would send it to commissioners, and commissioners would like your conditions and not change it.
Approve it.
Intent.
Okay. All right. All right.
And then the reason then could be approved next Tuesday. And then after that, how would that work with a survey and all of that stuff on getting building permits? If they need to.
If that's a condition, then it would still be recorded and effective, but it wouldn't, it would be contingent upon those being done, and until those are done, it'd just be recorded with the conditions. And so future planning directors and property owners could look at that and see if that was passed. And then later, once those conditions were passed, I'd recommend filing something or recording something that
With the
mentions all
land.
that's done.
But in terms of her getting a building permit, would I be able to issue a building permit like next Tuesday if this is approved?
By the commissioner, yeah, I would wait for it to be recorded and then do it.
Okay.
Even though the
But if it's
conditions haven't been
contingent
done?
on,
But if it's contingent on the survey.
and those other things, you can't issue it until you have the survey and.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the other.
Yes.
So we would need you to get your survey completed before we could issue you a building permit.
I can talk to both of them
Yeah.
today
Okay.
and see if we can have it by next Tuesday. So,
That'd make it easier, so then then the conditions that we have would already been met, so then the commissioners don't have to worry about that.
okay. What time next Tuesday? Same time?
10 o'clock.
Same time, same place?
Same place.
Same place.
10 o'clock.
Thanks, Kathleen.
You know.
Okay, with that, if you guys are ready to make a motion, this would be, I think we do need to clarify the buffer yard still, because I don't think I'm clear on where the buffer yard is required. So I think according to ordinance, she would have to do a type 3 buffer yard, which the ordinance states it would have to be on the 3 sides of her property. However, we talked about the north side of your property would not, those property owners up there are saying they would not want a buffer yard. Okay. What about the west property line?
There is already a buffer on the south side, and then I own the property in the back, so
Would
There'll
you
be
still
one
want?
there.
So what would you guys require out of this? Because I think according to ordinance, again, she would need a buffer yard that is, even though that, because I know you have planted some stuff, but I wouldn't say that that's a buffer yard that was defined by our ordinance. It was stuff that you guys put in, and it's lovely. I'm not saying that it's not. It's just our ordinance states that it has to be deciduous trees planted every 20 feet, and then you have to have a landscape mound, or you can plant pine trees.
But which side would that be on then?
That's required for the northwest and south sides of her property.
No, but now they
But-
don't want all that, so which sides will it actually be on?
That's what I'm asking you.
For us to decide. Oh.
She's saying, you know,
The
she
first three
owns.
did not. Is that what they said
Yeah,
on the
the
north?
first 3 don't want it, so
So
that's,
what about on back here? Where do they stand on this?
well, you see, you got this,
I wasn't.
you got these trees here.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to go to those 3 neighbors that are right adjacent with the park, where all the action is in the front. They said they don't want that. They enjoy watching things. I was not asked to go on back, so I didn't. The reason I bought the 8.6 acres in the back is so nothing could go in that would be detrimental to Garnet Drive that I live on. That was the whole reason to spend the money that we spent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that I don't have to divide my own property.
Yeah. there's no
With-
reason to do
That doesn't make sense to me. But, so I'm hoping that I don't have to put anything in the back. As those neighbors some of those neighbors enjoy watching as well, so.
You're not getting any complaints.
No, there was, someone started something, she told some of the neighbors that I was going to build storage units in the back, and I have no intention. For one, it's so wet back there. The only reason why I spent the money that I spent was just to protect the park from not having, you know, the property beside my park owned the property in back of us, and that house was up for sale, and I didn't know who was going to buy it and what they were going to do in back of us. And to protect the investment that we have up front, that's why I bought the back. So I'm hoping that I don't have to have a barrier between my own property lines.
That'd be on the south side and the
That's on the west.
west side. But then
That's
how
the
about on
west
south
side. Well, the south side, I already have something.
I have the map up on my screen.
Yeah. So we have the tree line that divides the property in back that we purchased. I have the tree line there that I just want to clean up. That's the only thing we want to do, is clean up that tree line. So if we wanted to walk through it, we could. And that's a big task.
You just want to clean it up.
I'm going to clean it up. Yep. I don't want to take it out. I love the trees. You know, I do. I would love to make that where I have some kind of decorative lighting through there. If somebody wanted to propose or something, we could plug the lights in and somebody does that. But I mean, that would be rare. And my grandkids, we have a four-wheeler or a mule that we like to ride back there. That's all we do in that property.
Okay, so this property line is going to move back.
35 feet. Uh-huh.
So I guess that is the question. Do you guys want her to plant a buffer yard in this area? Because right now she is required to by ordinance. And she's also required to plant a buffer yard here according to ordinance as well. So those, we've already talked. This one, she's got her property owners that signed off that say they don't want it. So if you guys are okay with that, we can just throw that one off, that we're not going to do it. But this is the question and this is the question.
Ms. Gray, have
What
you
about-
spoken with the neighbor to the south there that says Mark Drenth?
He just moved in a week or two ago. We have a barrier there, but it's not where his house is. It actually looks beautiful. He's taking care of it. I'm thrilled with him. I can go over there and have him sign off on something as well. But my husband met him last week when he was over doing things at the park. He met him, seems really nice. And so, yeah.
Rachel, if you don't put those stipulations on today, or if you take them away, I guess maybe is the better way to phrase it. In the future, let's say the residents change their mind, we made a mistake, we should have put that up.
That's
How do
something you
rec-
guys need
how
to
do you
consider.
rectify that?
I mean, because I think we know Mrs. Gray's character and we know she likes to do things nice and it's going to look lovely. However, at some point, this may change hands, and that's your role as Plan Commission, is to look beyond what is happening today. So, you know, the neighbors are happy today. Mrs. Gray is doing a fantastic job today. What happens, you know, at some point when she decides it's time to pass that forward and sell it, and, you know, then what happens with these parcels and what happens with the neighbors? So that is something to consider. That is, you know, why we have an ordinance in place, because we look beyond what's happening today. So I would say, yes, you should consider that in your decision making on, you know, if this is rezone general commercial, this could be a lot of different uses in the future. So again, you know, we have to plan for that future. So I guess think about that as you move forward. I think my perspective on it is we may not need the full buffer yard as required by ordinance, but maybe there's some kind of compromise to minimize what that requirement is. I don't think we should get rid of it altogether. You know, I don't think that, I mean, especially with rezoning, you're going to have general commercial up front and then having the conservation residential in back. You know, at some point, Mrs. Gray may want to develop the back for residential. Who knows? You know, and then do we want, and maybe she sells the front parcel for something else, even though I know that's not your intent, but we have to think worst case scenarios. And, you know, if that turns into, you know, a strip mall or something, is that okay to not have that buffer yard there between residential and general commercial?
Rachel, what are your thoughts about requiring, if we're going to reduce that amount, to require a separate petition under a waiver? Because I could see a surrounding property owner saying, well, if she wants to rezone it to this, that's fine, because there's going to be a buffer yard. Now, I'm not saying that is the case, but for us to come in on a petition to rezone and effectively grant a waiver, I think that could potentially be a problem.
Then I think we should think about that. I think it's appropriate. And yes, as a resident, if you are aware of what's in the ordinance, you go into this thinking this is a rezone.
On a condition, you can require more, but I don't think on a condition you can cut away at the minimum standards of the ordinance. That's the way I've always viewed rezoning petitions.
Yeah.
You can increase it to protect the people, but you can't lessen it.
Yeah. And that makes sense. So we could do that too. And that wouldn't slow her down at all, because I think we could move forward with a rezone. She can file separately for this waiver situation, and then we can do all of that concurrently with her moving forward with her survey. And, even once she gets that all squared away, she can get her building permit, and then we can work on this buffer yard piece.
Jeff, would the waiver just stay with her as an owner of that business, or continue for
It goes with the land.
See, just like the neighbor to the south, that's why I was asking about the south side, because to me, that's the most important, because that house is right up on top of the deal. And
Mrs. Gray, do you own that house?
Next door, no.
No?
To the south?
to the
Yeah.
south.
Like, I guess this
So
one
isn't that the guy just moved in, you said?
right here?
Yeah, he just moved in.
Yeah, he just moved in.
Am I missing a parcel line on this then? Yeah, I guess I am, maybe. On this particular one, so this is your property back here,
All of this is the house they're talking about.
right?
Mr. Burns, we bought the 8.6 acres from Mr. Burns, who lived right next door. And this person now owns here all the way back.
Okay, so there's a line missing on this
Yes.
drawing.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks Stacy, I see that up there now.
That one was clearer than printing off GIS.
Cool, okay.
Would the tree line here be considered any kind of buffer?
No, because we're talking about buffering this parcel, not this one.
And they don't want that on that side. So do I need to go
See
speak
that?
with him?
This line goes all the way back. And then she.
So what we just talked about too was that Jeff suggested treating the buffer yard issue
Yeah, they don't have
separately
that line
as a
in
waiver, so not as part of the rezone, because it's being less restrictive instead of more restrictive. So
Very good.
No.
that could be something that we look into, where you do talk to this and then present this to be a waiver of development standards, so it would go to BZA,
No, go to this one.
it would go to this one.
But I do have a buffer on that south side.
Okay, if it meets the ordinance, then you're fine. It's
Yeah.
just, we had talked about reducing that from the ordinance standard, and if that's the case, you'll need a waiver.
Okay, so I'd say today, let's not continue talking about the buffer yard situation. We'll treat that as a separate issue.
She gotta get
So
the
let's talk
rezoning
about the
done first
rezone.
before she can do anything.
Yeah, and if you want to add more restrictive anything to that rezone, we can do that. But I don't think there was anything else that we really talked about that was needed in addition to what the ordinance already covers. So I would say the petition or the motion, or what is currently on the table, I guess, is for Mrs. Gray, we would approve the rezone on the condition that that western property line is moved further to the west.
Yeah.
To accommodate, or to bring all her structures into compliance with that zoning district.
So at that point, she's required to do all the buffers, but she can get a permit, do all that, then she can come back with a waiver to take some of those buffers out.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
That does not have to go to the commissioners, it'd be just this board.
Yeah.
The buffer yard would just go
The
here.
waiver.
So we're gonna do it without the buffer yard, we're gonna do a petition without the buffer yard and just do the rezoning, right?
We're just talking about the rezone. The buffer yard can come back later, and you guys can decide to do less of a buffer yard then.
If there's no action taken beyond this rezone, a buffer yard is required in compliance with the ordinance.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff. I think that does make it much more clean. I also think you guys probably need to open up for any comment from the public on this too.
Can that requirement on the buffer yards, or the waivers, can that be changed later? Say if something really
Yes.
nuisance gets in there?
Well, once the
See-
waiver's in place.
See, that's what I'm saying. He would buy that property with those waivers
Correct.
already there,
That's why waivers are.
because then it could be a nuisance problem later, say when she sells it.
Sure. But
You know,
it
that
does
gets
run
kind of
away.
tricky, doesn't
It
it?
does.
Especially for that person on the south side.
Jeff,
But
what about,
this will give her time to talk to him and see what his thoughts are.
and one other question, what about deed restrictions on her property, the front part where it's the commercial, that it cannot be something that would be a nuisance further in the future? Can a planning commission or BZA require?
You can do that. It may be slightly redundant to do that because nuisances are always prohibited and the private actors always have an ability to come in. And also the planning staff would have the ability to come in if they create a condition that would be not in compliance with our code. So there, even if we don't put it in there, the things you're worried about that you'd like to enforce, I think we'd still have both the private and the public way to go after that kind of nuisance. So it's a good idea, but I think we're okay.
Just curious.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
And we still have the rules on hours and all that stuff, right?
Yeah,
Oh.
we can, and I would say if you make your motion, let's make sure we include that in there on the hours.
That's not automatic.
That's not automatic.
Correct.
We talked about that last time, but I might need refreshed on that one.
How do we make a motion to handle all this?
The first motion would be to favorable recommendation to approve the petition to rezone with the following conditions. Bang, bang, bang. So you can have operating hours, movement of property lines. Those are the two that I've heard discussed.
No, here,
We've got a good list.
It's on page.
So if it includes all of those, then just.
Yeah, so what,
Adopt that.
Adopt the staff recommendation.
the staff recommendation for an approval, I had in there, take those two parcels on County Road 100 or Madison Avenue, combine them into one parcel, which you would be doing with your surveyor anyway. So you'd have one parcel instead of those two in the front.
Yeah.
You would move your rear property line back to ensure all of your structures meet the proper setbacks for the general commercial zoning district. The petitioner shall obtain proper permits for any existing unpermitted structures. Petitioner shall show proof about the deck to make sure if the state has to come out and inspect it, that you guys will submit that to us. The type 3 buffer yard would be installed within 1 year of the rezone approval, which that can stay in here, but we can refile for that so that you can get that requirement reduced. All future improvements to the site shall follow the Madison County Land Use and Development Code. Sunday through Thursday, music shall be limited to the hours between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. On Friday and Saturday, music shall be limited to the hours between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. All conditions imposed by the rezone of this property shall be recorded with the property deed. So that kind of looks at the stuff that you were a little bit concerned with, Denise, that it would be in the deed so that it would stick with the property. So you could make the motion to approve those conditions with the rezone. And I don't think anything was out of line with what we've discussed, so.
No.
Is there anybody who would like to speak on this?
I'll make the motion to approve petition 2022-Z-004 as stipulated in the ordinance that we have before us.
I second that.
Got a motion to approve and a second. Send a favorable recommendation to the commissioners with all the staff recommendations. We have a motion and a second. Any other conversation? We have roll call, please.
Sure. Lindsay, did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right. Denise Spinner,
Yes.
Jerry Alexander,
Yes.
Lindsey Brown,
Yes.
Tom Shepherd,
Yes.
John Richwine,
Yes. Yes.
John Zimmerman,
Yes.
Corey Bolander,
Yes.
and Wes Lincoln.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you.
All right, Rachel, one last question before we leave this topic. In your staff recommendation, you have typically a land use variance would be sought for a petition like this.
Sometimes,
Okay, so,
I know last time Jeff and I talked a little bit, and Jeff was leaning like, no, land use variances are typically not upheld very well in court. So, you know, I think different communities handle it in different ways, and I would go with what your attorney says on not trying to do a land use variance.
The
So,
problem with use variances is you have to make a finding that there's no other possible use for this land other than what we want to make it, and that's demonstrably not true. So to give them what they want, give them a fair shake, that was my suggestion.
all right, I'm going to give you guys a Drew's Parts update. So Jessica Baston and I went out on the site on June 1st. His deadline, of course, was May 31st, so we did our site visit in the morning on June 1st. There was a lot of progress that had been made. There were still some items that were not yet completed. I do believe he went to the drainage board last week to talk with the drainage board, so there, Baston said she was trying to get to our meeting to kind of talk a little bit about what happened there. She was running late though, so she may not be here while we have this discussion. Oh, you're here. Thank you. I didn't even see you sneak in. So if, you know, she can add to this after I kind of go through my stuff to give you an update on that side of things. What I did decide at the time was, with the amount of work that had been done, I thought it was fair to go ahead and provide an incentive to finish up the work that had been going. So what I did send out an email to all of you guys that included the letter that I had that said the daily fine would be $1,000 per day. He has until June 30th to get it wrapped up and finished and done. If not, that fine will be full in force that we would be collecting, and it would be going to court at that point. I thought it was in the county's best interest, since there had been so much progress made and we were getting very close to getting finished, to let's get this done so that it can be complete and finished and we can move forward. I just feel like we're close to getting it done. The other piece of it is that we want Banning Engineering to come out and kind of look at the site once the final items are placed on the pond, so we can determine if it was constructed to plans or not, and what needs to be corrected, if anything. So that is where I am at on that. Jessica, do you have anything you want to add to it?
I don't have anything specific, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions of me on this? Or discussion too, so.
Yeah, I do.
Sure.
So, you have the engineer gonna come out and look at the setbacks and everything?
I think the engineer would be focusing on the pond construction and not necessarily the setbacks.
Okay.
Lindsay, Jeff.
Get on communication about the setbacks.
Jeff Healy,
Compliance.
sorry, Lindsay. Jeff Healy with Banning Engineering was hired by the Drainage Board to review the drainage plans that Drew's Parts had provided, and then he was also hired to inspect them after they were completed to make sure that they followed those drainage plans. And so they're not, I don't know where he's at today, but Banning hasn't been there to inspect the pond to make sure that it meets the plans that he had accepted and recommended to the Drainage Board.
In regards to the setbacks in the buffer yard, in my review of the plans, there is a 25-foot setback on the west side of the property along MacArthur Court and all the way down to the southern property line. There should be a 25-foot setback. And a setback means that the property owner is not allowed to construct a permanent structure in that setback area. With the buffer yard then starts at that 25-yard setback and goes in further in the property within a 25-foot additional buffer area. And that's where his buffer yard should be constructed. Does that make sense? Okay, because on the plans, it does show a 25-foot setback, and there is a note for a buffer yard, but the buffer yard, in my opinion, is not drawn in appropriately on the plan set. But when you look at the drawing sheets, the buffer yards are illustrated properly according to ordinance. However, they're not noted correctly on the site plan. So that's the one on MacArthur Court. On that side of the property is how I interpret that, because MacArthur Court is a local road, so that setback should be 25 feet. On the north side of the property, there is on School Street, on the School Street side, according to our thoroughfare plan map or our road functional or our road classification map, that is a local road as well. That's designated as a local road. So to me, again, yes. So the front setbacks are determined by road frontage. So that setback has to be 35 feet off of School Street. And then his buffer yard can start 25 feet after that, or within the 25 feet after that. Now, he does have an issue with the storage units that are on the north side of his property, because there is a drive that's already been gravelled that he wouldn't be able to construct his buffer yard in that area. So I did talk to Mr. Drews about he could construct the buffer yard within that 35-foot area instead of the 25-foot because of that issue with the driveway.
Okay.
So his side yard setback, I did reference MacArthur Court and that being a local road, but it doesn't necessarily matter because that's not the road frontage that he has. That's his side yard setback, would be 25 feet. His setback on the front of the property is the 35 feet.
Okay. Do we know if the drainage board looked at, that drainage that comes like off his property instead of it going through the drains that are set, that are, I guess, purposely for the flow of water? Because it's actually kind of diverting some of it and going across the street and creating another issue. Do we know if the drainage board had even looked at that?
I am not aware about that, but I have not been to a drainage board meeting, so I can't speak to that.
Okay. So
I'm not sure I
you're
understood what he
extended for
said.
30 more days, right?
I'm not sure I understood what he was
To
asking.
June 30th.
I'm sorry, what was that, Lindsay?
You asking us to extend it for 30 more days to June 30th?
Yes.
How are we for sure that he's gonna have it done by June 30th?
We are not.
Lindsay's paying $1,000 a day to June
I don't think
30th.
it matters. Honestly, I don't think it matters.
That'd matter to me.
Wouldn't me.
And Lindsay, my decision was made because from what I saw out there, like I said, there was a lot of work that had been done. We're getting close. I did not want to halt progress and stop stuff based on making an action or putting a stop work order on it as of May 30th. I thought it was in the county's best interest to try to get this completed within the next 30 days rather than it not. And if it doesn't get, if we get to June 30th, there is a $30,000 fine that's going to be placed on Mr. Drews.
Okay. And I agree there has been a lot of progress up there. And, I'm not one to hinder progress as well. I don't want to just keep kicking this can down the road either, though,
I agree.
Now, as far as the equipment being removed, and, because I really haven't seen too much equipment being removed from the site.
No, as
Like
it
it's-
stands, he still has the September 1st deadline for the equipment being removed.
Okay.
There has also been I have also sent Mr. Drews a violation letter for his site not being properly zoned. And that went out in May. And he had a June 1st deadline to respond to that. And he is appealing my interpretation of the ordinance. And this will be going to the Board of Zoning Appeals to be heard. And the Board of Zoning Appeals will make a ruling on my violation letter on his site.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. There was a question you had earlier, or there was something you discussed earlier, and we need more clarification on it, Lindsay. You were talking about the drainage, on what the drainage board was reviewing with a spillway area. Can you repeat what you were asking about that? Because I don't think some of the Plan Commission members understood what the question was.
You know how we have the drainage that kind of flows down the side? But that was actually going across the street to the house right across on MacArthur. Instead of it coming down the normal flow, is actually crossing the street and going down and actually going towards 109, which is increasing the flooding in that area.
Hi, Lindsay. It's Jessica Baston, the county engineer. Can you hear me okay? Good. As part of the Drainage Board's review, my understanding is that Banning Engineering did review that portion of it. There's a big question throughout the whole watershed as to whether that water does come off of the Drews Parts property or if it comes down MacArthur Court. And so as part of the review with the Drainage Board, what we had discussed doing was to get the work done with on the Drews Parts site, reestablish that ditch along MacArthur Court, which we have discussed and met out on the field and discussed, and then see what the end result there is and see what needs to be done. I think the problem is that without a much larger watershed study, we don't have a good understanding of where all that water comes from. We know there's a lot of water. I think everyone would agree with that. There's just a question as to how much comes from Drews Parts and how much goes around Drews Parts down the road. I do think that the landscape buffering and some of the other grading that was proposed as part of the drainage review will help with that. That's the intent of the detention pond, is to have that all of the stormwater from the site go into the detention pond, and that's part of what we're going to be keeping an eye on.
Okay. You know, I guess I would say the best time to look at it is when it's raining.
Absolutely.
Because what I see it coming from is it's going between the setback area and the fence line. And when it used to just travel down to the culvert area and then flow straight down, you know, MacArthur to Flintwood. And now because of the setback and stuff, it's actually going between the two and it's going across the street, like redirecting it across the street.
Right.
To MacArthur, to the other people's yard who normally didn't have much.
Right.
A little more erosion as well.
And if you recall, part of what we discussed when we were out there in the site was that we may need to establish that ditch, that roadside ditch, further up MacArthur Court than it currently is. That's part of what we want to see, what these modifications, what an impact they have. We don't want to just go and establish more of a ditch up there if it ends up not being necessary. So.
All right. And this is for us. Have we determined the cleanup after this, as far as what we're going to do from all that, you know, that runoff, all that mud and everything?
Within the ditch, you mean? Do you mean within the MacArthur Court ditch?
MacArthur and
Yeah, down the ditch. So down the ditch line, we've met with for excavating. We have pricing from them to reestablish that ditch, and that involves dipping it out, cleaning out the sediment, lining it all with riprap, and ensuring that it actually functions as a ditch the way it's supposed to. We also met with Jeff about going down and around Litwood Drive to reestablish that ditch. As you know, there's a bigger concern about the outlet because right now the outlet has been blocked by a resident. We've chosen not to do anything about that until this Drew's Parts issue is resolved because we do understand the residents' concerns. But there's going to need to be some further action down in that area. We are very well aware of that, and that was discussed at the Drainage Board last week. But again, that will be kind of paused until the rest of this is resolved.
All right. As long as we don't forget about it, I'm okay.
I'm pretty sure you all won't let us forget about it, so.
I will not.
Fair enough.
I have one more question
Thank you.
in regards to the setbacks. So Rachel, are you saying that the site plan that was given by the engineer is correct and the setbacks are working on it, or we just wait until it's complete and then they go back out and verify it? I mean, what if it's not right? And I don't want to cause the contractor with Drew's Parts further work and having to redo something. I mean, has anyone inspected and looked at where we are now, and then the pictures that we received with the riprap and the textiles with the holes, and, you know, is that going to cause further issue? Your response was that it was sent to the county engineering, so I'm not sure if that's Jessica's department or who's the one to say so far on the progress when you were out there. Is everything being done correctly?
That's a good question. So that did get forwarded over to the county to Jessica. She did share it with Banning. That is something that will be looked at when they go out on site to do their inspection for the drainage area in the pond. In regards to the setbacks, I think there is some confusion on setback versus buffer yard. So are you asking, am I going to check the setbacks or am I going to check the buffer yard?
Or both? I mean, is everything in compliance to the zoning? I mean, are they building it in the right place? I guess is the concern that we keep getting.
I think that if the Plan Commission, from what I go out and what I see on site, my understanding is it appears to be in compliance with what was delivered on the plans or what was approved on the plans, because Mr. Drews did get a location improvement permit for it. He paid the fee for it. It was approved by the planning department's office prior to me being there. So I feel like I have to honor those plans that were submitted and approved as submitted. You know, I did go out on site and talk to Mr. Drews about my interpretation of where the setbacks end and where your buffer yard can begin. And so that was shifted because I think originally the plantings were going to happen within the setback, not within the buffer yard setback. So that I think got corrected when we were on site together. I know there has been some concern about the buffer yard not extending the full length on the east side of the property. And that's where I don't feel like as planning director or interim planning director that I can go back on what was approved originally and say that he needs to extend that buffer yard further south. Had I been in there reviewing the plans from the beginning, I likely would have pushed for that buffer yard to be extended all the way south. However, I was not in place there. There was someone else, and that was the plan that was approved. So I don't feel like it is something that I can do is require more than what was approved at this point. So I think the Plan Commission, if they would like to, we could hire someone to go out and do measurements off the property line to determine exactly where the buffer yard starts to make sure it is appropriately in compliance. But that would be an expense on the Plan Commission. So I am not a surveyor. I don't locate survey lines and pins and those things. However, with the plans and doing general measurements out there, I feel like it is sufficient and is meeting the intent of the ordinance. However, if we need exact measurements, that is beyond what I am capable of doing, that we need to get a surveyor out there or an engineer out there to actually do the measurements and get you the information that you need if that's what you want.
I guess I would have thought that would have been on Drew's Parts end if he's building this to comply with site plan map that was given, if these are the specifications and the dimensions of where he needs to be from his property line, that would have been measured and drawn out.
And we could with Banning, we could request that from Banning. But that would be an expense. I know just for Banning to come out to do an inspection, Jess and I are waiting to make sure that we are not wasting any money by having him come out. We want to make sure the proper things are in place that have been requested or that are required as part of the plans, because we don't want Banning to come out when they're going to observe the same things that we can observe with our own eyes. Let's get it, the rest of the drainage in place before they come out and we spend the money on having that inspection done. So we can certainly ask Banning to look into measuring those buffer yards and that sort of thing, if that's something the Plan Commission would like.
I guess my concerns are so many complaints that we have. I mean, I'm concerned for lawsuits against the county, for not having this looked at and make sure that we're, enforcing those proper setbacks and so forth, that everything's measured correctly. And again, looking at Drew's parts, I don't want to cause him further delays or fines, because something didn't get done correctly, and then we have to go back, and now we have further delays. I mean, on both sides of the issue, to protect both sides of the parties here and the neighborhood. It's just a little bit confusing. It just seems, should have someone go out and take a look and measure at the appropriate time.
I agree. And I would say that the way that this was difficult for me to come in at the end of this or the middle of this, because the things that I would expect to be in place were not necessarily in place. And I think that is a Plan Commission issue at the end of the day, that there are not necessarily the tools in place in the ordinance to guide a project like this currently. Other projects that I've worked on that are similar to this, there would be a engineer involved that would be going out and doing site inspections along the way. That cost is typically picked up by the property owner, not the county or not the municipality. And in this case, we don't have anything in our ordinance that requires the property owner to pick up that cost. So, there is limited funds from planning on budgets that have been approved on how much money we can spend on having someone go out there. So, this is a difficult thing for your planning staff, that we don't necessarily have the money that we need to go out there and do this either. So I guess keep that in mind as you guys are moving forward, that you do need to equip your staff with the tools that they need to be able to implement and work through projects like this without them becoming as messy as this one has become.
I just want it done correctly.
I think we all want it done correctly. I don't think anyone started this thinking that we didn't want this done correctly. But like I said, I don't think the correct tools are in place to equip your staff to have a project like this go smoothly. And I know that's very blunt, but that's my observation of what I've experienced here.
So, all right, at the end of this discussion then, for what you've seen there and a recommendation, when and can we ask someone to come take a look at the appropriate time to check those measurements? And can we as a board, place that condition upon the landowner to pay for that, to ensure that it's being done correctly? I would think that'd be something he'd want to do anyway, but, to do it and follow the proper zoning laws with the setbacks and buffer yards and so forth. I mean,
from my perspective, I think that is a cost that the county would have to pick up right now, because that has not been something that has been advertised to the public and property owners, so they are not aware that that would be in place. So I don't think that is appropriate. However, that's just my opinion as staff, so you guys can certainly make different decisions if you would like.
How much are we looking to have that looked at?
I don't know. I think just for him to come out and look at the pond stuff that we were asking, it was $1,000.
Yeah, Jeff had said that it would be $1,000 for a site visit for just him. That does not include any surveying or any in-depth measuring of buffers or anything like that. So you're probably looking at 5 to 10 would be my best guess. 5 to 10,000. But I honestly don't have any idea without getting a true price.
So Jess would have a way better grasp of fees like that. Sorry, I don't know. I really don't know. So.
Kelly Drews, 705 East School Street. If you would like, I would call my engineer, RMA, They're in Marion, reputable engineers, and I can try and have them out this week. I can get with Jason, I can let you guys know, and I will have him, if you want to make me a list of what you want for the buffers and all that, I can have his guys come out, because they came out a week ago to shoot the grade in that, because there were spots that were not low enough, so he's been out twice to reshoot it, and we're digging that deeper. But if you'd like to make me a list, email it, whatever, and I will give it to him, and I will get you your answers.
Are the property line pins visible, you know?
Not that I know of.
What I would do is I would have him make those visible, and then it would be easy to measure off, you know, the 25 feet and the 30 feet.
Will the engineer be able to find that, or do I need to call the surveyor?
I don't know.
Engineer.
Unless they don't have a survey crew. It might be the survey.
It depends.
I think
That's
he's
why I was
got-
asking if it was visible or not, because if it's visible, then
I
it'd be
have
easy.
no idea if it's visible, because it's under,
But you probably need to find that out sooner or later anyway, just to make sure that everything's right, so.
I know the property line between Mr. Drew's.
you need to come up here and talk.
I'm going to pop in real quick. I think it's very kind for Mr. Drews to say that he would have his engineer come out and do it, but I think that we do need to have our own engineer, if it's banning, come out and do it. I think that it would not be in our best interest to use his engineer. I think just for multiple reasons, especially just transparency and appearances, so.
Banning did give my engineer, who's recommended my engineer to him. So,
Good. Mark, excuse me, got a frog in my throat. Mark Tompkins, 15 MacArthur Court. The property line between your property and ours is very visible, so that's, if there's a fence line and there's poles, you know, stakes, you know, at the corners of our lot to yours. So that should be fairly visible as far as measuring, you know, from that point. On up the road, I can't speak to that. Couple of concerns I have, we'll talk about the spillway first, is when, and only thing that really drew my attention to is number one is the noise in putting the riprap down was extensively loud. You know, imagine with that. So I did go out and look. What I saw is that, you know, they were putting geotextile up, but there were bare spots in between, and then rock was being dropped down on top of it. And that's a concern to me. But what's a little bit more of a concern, Kelly, is at the bottom of the riprap going into the ditch is still the silt barrier with the hazmat barrier things underneath it, and it's starting to bulge out into the ditch. And what concerns me is that I would have thought there would have been a retainer wall there or something to hold back that dirt and all that weight of the riprap. Otherwise, you know, with the, you know, there could be a potential washout over time. And so if the county were to put, you know, riprap down through the ditch and everything, that it would eventually, or could eventually wash on out into the ditch again. I got pictures from our ditch, or for the ditch along our property, where there used to be riprap all along the side of that ditch, you know, and it's not there. It has all washed down to downstream to other ditches and so forth. So there's a concern I have with that, in that from your property into the ditch area, that something solid be put there to keep that washout from occurring. You know, that's one concern I have. You know,
Rachel, would that be, when banning's out, was that something they'll be looking at?
It's something I
Jessica.
believe they will be looking at.
because all it's right there right now is the silt fence that they put up, and then the hazmat barrier things, and a couple of old bales of hay that have been there since December 2020 or January 2021.
All of that ditch will be redone all the way down MacArthur Court from Kelly Drew.
I understand, and I know that.
And then at the spillway, we had some engineering plans at Drainage Board where they were pumping that out. They had some type of silt barrier in there so that wouldn't come back in and fill in. I'm going to assume that comes back out of there, and that may be what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like where you
that's-
got the spillway coming right here, and you got the fence, and then you got the ditch runs through
Right.
here. Right in here is still behind where all the dirt is, and they've put all the riprap up here.
Right.
all that's right there right now are hay bales, and in front of that.
And that's the same stuff that's been there for a long time.
Right, but what I'm saying is due to the rains over the last couple of weeks, the bottom of that is starting to bulge out now.
Gotcha.
And it's running down underneath. And so my concern is that without having that kind of a strengthened barrier right there, that the work that Mr. Drews is putting in with the riprap and the mud is eventually this will give way and start pushing on down the ditch, and then we have another problem again. And I'm just trying, like Denise said, I want the job done right. You know, that's the concern I have with that.
When he gets done with that spillway, the county's release rates are very stringent, even more stringent than the city of Anderson's. So.
But you understand my
I
concern.
do. But what I'm saying is, trying to get at is any water that's running off of Drew's part should be, quite honestly, very minimal. In the future.
Coming from the pond, yes, I agree, because you got the high wall up there. But what you have is you do have where it's graded down from above the pond, from the north side of it and along the south and east side of it, does converge down to the ditch area. And so there is some drainage that is occurring from that area into it now, whenever it rains.
But that would be something I would think that should be going into the detention pond, not going out and around the pond.
Well, remember, and I know you've been out there, I've seen you out there, but it's like, you got the retention pond up here, but then you gotta come down, the fence is down here. So you have a bit of a grade that occurs, so all this that comes through here and all this comes down through here, still drain into the ditch. And you do have the riprap there, but what I'm saying is that the riprap was put in before we had a solid retaining wall or solid something there to keep that mud and everything from pushing down and washing out. And that's where I have that kind of concern with. That, the county spends the money, they come out, they clean all the ditches, they get it done, and in 5 or 10 years, will we have another issue again? And I'm just trying to negate that kind of an issue up front versus having to come here again and we all start fussing at each other again. That's that concern I have. The other thing I just want to mention real quick is, I had spoken to Rachel about, the barrier and stuff and trees and stuff, and she told me, and after that I went and talked to Mr. Drews, and he said he has no plans putting trees there along the east side of the pond that adjoins to my property. They used to be full of trees through there, and it created a nice filter and everything. At this point, I guess I have to live with that, unless I put trees on my side of the property that'll eventually grow up. But what I do have a concern is that and this is off the plans that Mr. Graham submitted to my neighbor Sean, and looking at it, it does mark, I do see the 25-foot setback, agree with that. But according to the plans, the top of the berm should be, how this number came up, 74.38 feet. Bizarre to me, why not just say 75? But that number sticks out to me because of that. I took a laser rangefinder, and I have walked from the corner of my lot, from the utility pole to the northwest, going up about 150 foot, and measured the top of that ridge where the berm is. Nowhere is it 75 feet at all. You're looking at 17 yards, 17 and a half yards, 16 and a half yards, so forth. So this is where I have a concern. Was that berm built too far east on the retention pond based on what these plans are? And these are the plans that were filed with the county. And I just have a concern, are we sticking to the plan or are we not? And I don't mean to focus on you, you're just the nearest person.
No, that's fine. And that's the thing, I mean, we're not engineers, that's why we hired, with the Drainage Board, hired Banning Engineering, to be our eyes out there and make sure that they followed the plans that we presented and that they recommended that would.
And, if there was a lessons learned here with this, and Mr. Drews, I do not mean this personally, but I would have suggested a project manager on your side to at least manage this project and everything, because I know that when Mr. Smith has been out there grading and so forth, there's not really been any stakes out there to say this is where this goes or whatever. It's just almost, it's indicative or just kind of like okay, this is where we need to put this, and this is where the berm went, or whatever. And I'm not fussing at you, I'm just saying, I think things were just laid out by sight, not by actual measurement, and I have a concern with that. And I'm trying to keep from you and I getting entanglements any further. I would suggest, and I ask, that if someone does go out to measure the property line, you probably have, that, there'll be engineers out there, probably someone representing, and I asked that maybe Lindsay and I, as representative of the commission and the neighborhood, be there too, and we just all look at it and we say, okay, this is how we all see the measurements taking place. For me personally, it's along the east side of the property. But for the rest of the property, that could be for, anyone else that's of interest. So.
Did you want me to add anything? I think you covered what I was going to say.
Well, I didn't know if you were going to add anything as far as,
I'll just reiterate that the questions about the pond construction, that is why we have Banning engaged. I can't speak to the interface between the berm and the drainage ditch because I didn't do the review, and I just don't remember that part off the top of my head, to be honest. But that would be a Banning question. I would say it's not likely that there would be a wall because that's not a typical way to construct that. The berm functions as the wall. I understand your concerns, but I think that also goes back to the way that the drainage within the site goes. As Commissioner Richwine said, the effective runoff from the pond, we have some of the most stringent discharge rates in the state, much to many of the developers' dismay. But that is, it should significantly reduce the runoff from the site. Now, that being said, we don't know how much is from the site. This goes back to the watershed study that I was talking about. A watershed study is a very pricey thing to do, and really I don't know that it would gain us any better information than what we would see by looking at the site afterwards to observe where water's coming from.
My concern is there where the riprap comes down to the fence, and then that's the start of the ditch. You get about that much of an elevation difference, and behind those hay bales,
and
it's just mud, with the barrier and then the rock, and that it's already starting to show signs of, give way.
And part of that interface reconstruction does come into play with what we'll have for excavating do. So that certainly is a concern of mine. Absolutely, and I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, any other discussion? Ready to move on, Rachel?
Yep. Okay, iWork software update. We had funds approved. I have Stacy turning around smiling. We had funds approved by the commissioners to use the unsafe building fund to help pay for iWorks. However, we are still working through some issues with that, so we will keep you guys posted as we move forward with that. Fee schedule update. We have had some vacations in our office, and we've had some things on our plate that we just discussed, and we have made some progress on this proposed fee schedule, but I still have a few things that I need to work through with staff before we have a more fine-tuned fee schedule for you. One of those people that I need to speak with is Tom Weitzel, our building inspector. Stacy and Liz have really gotten into the nitty-gritty with me on, what will work and what won't work on this and how we handle things, and, just looking at inspections in a different way. As we kind of talked about with the Drew's Parts discussion, we are including a line in here that would require a property owner to pay for engineering services if the county has to hire someone to do an inspection like we just talked about. So those things will help be better addressed for someone moving forward, or this department moving forward. So stay tuned on the fee schedule update. If in the meantime, if you guys have any suggestions or input on it, please feel free to send it my way because we can make sure we include it in the next draft of revisions. Another thing we've been working on in the office is a website update. I think our current, maybe I should say a web page update. So our planning department web page Some things are kind of difficult to find. I think it's kind of difficult that our zoning ordinance is chopped up into like 16 different documents. I'd like to see it all combined so it's one searchable document for the public. There are some items that are out of date, so with Stacy and Liz, we've worked on, trying to figure out what needs to be updated so it's easier for the public to find the information they're looking for. We get a lot of calls in our office about zoning maps and what the zoning district is of a particular property, so we want to make sure that that link is very front and center so we can direct appraisers to that link instead of having to look at a property with them. So just things like that. So that might be changing soon. And then the last thing on my list is just some staff recognition. And I hope Liz is listening because Liz has really taken hold of the plat review, and she's been doing a fantastic job. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. When we first came into the office, she was not doing the plat reviews. I actually had someone on HWC's staff working with me to do the reviews, and Liz kind of spoke up and said, I'd really like to do this. And so we've transitioned the plat reviews over to her, and I've been super impressed. She is like my go-to person on anything to do when I get a call about, can I do this and that with my property? Liz knows all the answers, and so you guys should be very proud to have her on your staff. She's doing an excellent job. So I just wanted to recognize her as part of the meeting today. So if you're listening, Liz, you're kicking butt, and we appreciate it. And that's all I have.
All right. Anybody else have anything? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thanks.